Australian Treasurer Jim Chalmers has announced new tax cuts for Australians earning over $45,000, but there is a catch. Those earning this amount will see just a $5 weekly tax cut starting next year, which may barely cover the price of a cup of coffee these days. While the cuts are modest, they also build on prior tax reforms, leading to an average annual benefit of $2,548, or about $50 a week by 2027. The government insists that despite the cost of living challenges, such tax relief will help to combat bracket creep. However, $5 extra tax cut comes with a hefty price tag. There it is on the left, and there's the price on the right. The budget hit will be about $17 billion by 2030.
Speaker, tonight the government is proud to be delivering more tax relief. Every Australian taxpayer will get a tax cut next year and the year after to top up the tax cuts which began in July. Yeah. This will take the first tax rate down to its lowest level in more than half a century. Yeah. These additional tax cuts are modest, but they will make a difference. The average earner will have an extra $536 in their pocket each year when they're fully implemented.
For more, let's bring in our money man, Dr. Stephen Entickett from CIA Tax, also the host of Money Matters here on Ticker. The most exciting day in the world is, of course, budget night, or was it?
Well, every year I invite my staff to come round to my place. We'll get some popcorn, we'll watch the Treasurer's speech and all the analysis after that. But it didn't live up to any expectation. And by the way, no one's ever taken me up on that offer either. But look, no, it was a bit of a well, you're welcome to join me as well, Aaron, but we did sit there for quite a few hours last night trying to absorb much to do about nothing, really. I mean, ultimately, this budget's all about election. We're not going to be able to even implement the budget package over the next few days of Parliament sitting. There'll be an election called. And I kind of feel like they're just keeping their powder dry. They said, look, let's just get something out, and then we'll start to make a whole heap of new promises over the next few weeks to be re-elected.
It's obviously been a really difficult time for a lot of businesses out there, particularly small businesses and families doing it tough as well. And people who are working are noticing the price of everything is going up. If you're working from home, the cost of transport to get to work now is going up. The price of living is going up. The price of your rent, your mortgage has gone up as well. Many saying $5 is just simply insulting.
It is, and the tax take is going up. You know, we have this thing called bracket creep, which all treasurers love. Each year, inflation pushes your wages up into a higher tax bracket, and you pay more and more tax as you go along. That is taking a fair sting in cost of living. You know, it's pulling more and more of our money out, putting it into the federal treasury. I like to call this the cafe latte $5. You know, it's going to give you one cafe latte, if you like, a week at the coffee shop. It's like a coffee card, though. They're really taking more and more tax from you each time, but occasionally they'll give you a free coffee. And that's what we're seeing here, a free coffee. But it's not even until 2026. It's a long, long way away. And then they're going to give us another free coffee a year later. So I think it's a bit of an insult to families. I don't think they should have even done it. The only reason they did it is so they can announce that they're doing tax cuts for their re-election promises. So it is an insult, and I don't agree with it at all. Bracket creep is higher. It's taking more and more from us. It's not good.
We're waiting for the highly anticipated budget reply from the opposition leader Peter Dutton. There's been a lot of criticism, though, from even supporters of the coalition saying that it's only Labor at the moment actually talking about doing anything. We've got the Liberals talking about nuclear energy, which feels like a very long way away and an expensive way to get to reducing your power prices eventually. We know that much of the cost of living has gone up because of the increase in power prices over the last 3 years under this Labor government. When we talk about the instant tax write-off for small business, I'd been seeing a lot of budget submissions from organisations that represent business saying, you know, we need to have this as a long-term built-in $20,000, in fact, perhaps increased to $100,000 for an instant tax write-off. Labor showing, I guess, their true colours when it comes to small business, cutting it almost completely down to $1,000. I know you deal with a lot of small businesses. What will the impact be?
I think the impact's huge. Like, you know, technically it actually hasn't been in this year, but they keep saying it is in, but we haven't got legislation. So we've got legislation saying this year it's been $1,000 and parliamentarians saying, no, we're going to pretend it is in this year, even though we haven't got legislation. No mention of it going into 2026. This is a huge compliance burden. You know, if you go buy something worth $1,100 for your business, you now have to put that into a depreciation schedule. You have to claim it over 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it might be, which will impact on your cash flow, your tax flow, and all those sorts of things. You're going to have to pay your accountants more because, managing those depreciation schedules and all those sorts of things, it's not just the ability to write it off straight away and receive the tax credit for it. It's a compliance burden that goes on for year after year after year after year. I'm tipping it's going to be an election announcement. It's just absolutely absurd to put that impost on small business.
And it's obviously difficult for small business as it is. What do you think the reaction will be? Because does this impact the economy? The whole concept of the $20,000 asset write-off was to get things moving again during difficult times. And given that the Reserve Bank has begun starting to cut rates, we're expecting more this year, they are thinking that the economy is starting to slow down. We've been hearing suggestions there could be a recession. To actually cut something like the instant tax write-off, which encourages businesses to spend, what do you anticipate the impact on the economy could be?
Well, I can tell you as an accountant, I'll be telling all my clients, if you're going to have an expenditure of less than $20,000, let's get it in before June 30. It's not bad tax planning to be able to do that anyway, because there is no guarantee going further on. So I think we might get a bit of a sugar hit now, where people will spend a bit to try and get in before that June 30 cut down. But then after that, I can tell you spending is going to cut down. If you're spending $10,000 on an item and you're going to get a 30 or 40 cents in the dollar tax bracket, you're really only spending $6,000 or $7,000 immediately. So your cash flow is less affected. If you're going to see, $300 or $400 or $500 of that coming back each year for the next 10 years, it really is going to make a decision. And I'm tipping businesses will put their hand in their pocket and not spend.
On the tax cuts, Labor didn't go ahead with some of those stage 3 tax cuts, particularly for high income earners that they deem as being able to afford it. Do you think that those people will be looking at the $5 tax cut saying new beauty, or do you think they'll be going into the election frustrated that they weren't included in those broader tax cuts, which they had been earlier promised?
Yeah, look, I just see it as hypocrisy. 1 minute we're doing one thing, we're not going to favour the rich, and now we're bringing in new tax cuts. It's going to favour everybody equally. There's mixed messages here, mixed signalling. No one really knows what's going on. But look, $5 a week isn't going to affect anyone, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're struggling with cost of living. It's not going to get you a McHappy meal. And if you're rich or richer and paying a higher thing, it becomes, in percentage terms, less and less relevant. So in my mind, these tax cuts are absurd. They don't give back what they're taking in Bracket Creek. They're stealing from us all the time with that. And until they change that policy of linking brackets to inflation, this is going to continue, a repeated theme.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talk about that $1.7 or $17 billion cost by 2030 to the budget. But interestingly, just this year, the Treasurer has announced that they're expecting $6.2 billion more in tax just in this year. So if you think about $17 billion over the next 5 years that we will get back, they're taking over $6 billion a year from us. And is that the problem here, that we talk about the impact that business inflation has? The government likes to point at the big supermarkets. But what about the inflation of government? Everything, when you deal with the government, if you're getting a passport, the costs have gone up. Everything keeps rising, stamp duty, etc. Does the government have a big part to play in inflation from your perspective?
No, absolutely. They're borrowing like there's no tomorrow, especially at a state level, and that's feeding into inflation as well. It's funny when you say that, Aaron, I really appreciate what you've just said there. The government links everything to inflation. They link the beer excise, even though they've paused that for a little while, to inflation. Everything they have is linked to inflation, but our wages aren't. The amount of tax they take from us is not linked to inflation. It's all about them at the moment, and it's not about a picture of Australia, a way of increasing Australia's productivity, Australia's economy as a whole, some growth, and then be able to afford these things. It's all about them getting in as much as they possibly can to be able to fund what they want to fund, and not really focus on the growth of Australia and really the standard of living of Australians. I actually find it very disappointing. And I'm hoping that over the election announcements, we actually see some things from either party, from any party, that starts to address the fundamental issues. Is we're spending more than we're earning, and we're taking from the people to be able to do that. It's an absurd position. We really do need some real leadership that stands up and says, Australia is a lucky country, this is what we're going to do, and this is what's going to make it greater for all Australians.
Steve, you are the man with the plan. You've got that great book out there, but also you and I have spoken many times since Ticker has been around in 2019 about the budget. You and I have spoken on Ticker many times about finances, and you're always the ever optimist. I think anyone who's been watching this interview for the past 10 minutes will feel a bit of a change there, that you don't seem as optimistic about this budget and about where Australia is headed. We are expecting, as I said earlier, Peter Dutton, the opposition leader, to speak in Parliament for the budget reply Thursday night at 7:30 as it happens. What do you want to hear from the coalition, given that there are two major choices coming at this election? And as I say, I feel like Labor have at least put things out there when it comes to trying to help. They might be causing, but they're at least doing something to say we're trying to help. The coalition opposing the tax cuts, they were the ones who brought us AUKUS, which is $18 billion to the US over the next 5 years for submarines that we may or may not get. Goodness knows how much we had to pay to the French to get out of that project as well. Do you see hope from the coalition, I guess is my question?
Look, I see opportunity. Australia is the land of opportunity. Now, ultimately we've got governments just paddling around in and going downhill, if you like, or downstream or upstream, whatever it might be. They're just going around in circles. They're not really doing anything to increase the income and the growth of the country. I believe there's appetite. I believe Australia is a proactive, forward-looking country, and that needs to be supported. We need to start to put things into play that is going to grow the economy of Australia and therefore increase the standard of living. We were very blessed, the generation that grew up through the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. We had forward-thinking governments that put things in place that we're reaping the benefits from now. We need governments that are going to pull out a surprise on budget night like Keating and Costello and other leaders did, that said, bang, we're making fundamental change and this is going to be great for Australia going into the future. So my challenge to the opposition would be, put up or shut up. Otherwise we're just going to be sitting there going round and round in circles, picking between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Maybe it's time someone stood up and said, here is a big vision for Australia. This is a lucky country. Let's move forward. Let's get excited.
Dr. Stephen Entickett from CIA Tax and also host of Money Matters right here on Ticker. Check out his program for all of the money tips that there are to be heard about the Australian budget as well. Appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Aaron.